Hello and welcome to another edition of English Vocabulary Matters. Today we're going to do trivia quiz number 4. If you haven't looked at the other 3 quizzes, go to my channel and check them out. As we did before, I'll be reading you 10 general knowledge questions and giving you 4 options to choose from. It's your job to choose the correct answer before the time runs out. So the first question is from the world of medicine. Question number 1. The word vaccination is related to the Latin word for, is it A, a cow, B, a needle, C, an illness, or perhaps you think it's D, a medicine? Which of those do you think is the correct answer? Well, I can tell you that it is, in fact, the first one, a cow. And the Latin word for cow is vaca, actually pretty much the same as the Spanish word. So the reason for this is because of the association with cows and the development of the first vaccines. So a British physician, Edward Jenner, actually noticed that the girls who milked the cows became immune to smallpox, which was a very serious disease at that time. And he supposed that this might be because cows actually had a related but much milder virus called cowpox. So when the girls were exposed to this virus, cowpox, it kind of primed their immune system to resist better the more deadly version of smallpox. So he developed the technique of actually injecting people with cowpox to protect them from the serious disease of smallpox. And he called this process vaccination because it was derived from the cowpox virus. So moving on to question number 2. How old is the oldest known living tree? The 4 options are as follows. Is it A, 900 years old, B, 1,200 years old, C, 3,500 years old, or finally D, 4,600 years old? Well, I can tell you that the correct answer is the last one, D, 4,600 years old. It's an amazing age for a tree, isn't it? Well, in fact, this has been considered the oldest tree since about 1957, when the bristlecone pine was discovered. It's called Methuselah, and it was discovered by a famous tree researcher after he took cores from many bristlecones in the area and counted the rings. Of course, that's how we estimate the age of a tree, isn't it? By counting the growth rings that you can find. So moving on to question number 3. Which is the largest organ in the human body? Do you think it's A, the skin, B, the liver, C, the lungs, or D, the pancreas? Which of those is the largest or the biggest organ in the human body? Well, I can tell you that the correct answer is in fact the first one, A, the skin. Now you may be surprised by that, but technically the skin is considered an organ, even though it's external and a lot of the others are internal. In fact, there are over 70 organs in the body. Each has a unique function. The average adult supposedly carries around 3.5 kilos or 2 meters squared of skin on their body. So it's much, much bigger than any of the other organs. Okay, so moving on to question number 4. What is umami? Do you think it's A, a fish, or B, an Asian country, or C, a taste, or perhaps you think it's D, paper folding? Which of those is the correct answer? Well, I can tell you the correct answer is in fact C, a taste. Now you're probably familiar with the tastes of sweet, bitter, sour, and salty. But did you know that there was actually a fifth flavor, which is called umami? It's derived from the Japanese word, and it basically means savoriness. Now, in English, the concept of savory is basically a taste that we associate with things like cooked meat or broths. And in 1985, that term umami was officially recognized to describe that kind of taste. And it's very much associated with an additive that is used a lot in Asian food, monosodium glutamate or MSG, which kind of enhances that umami flavor. Moving on to question number 5. The novel by George Orwell, 1984, was published in which year? Do you think it was A, 1984, B, 1964, C, 1949, or D, 1973? Which of those do you think is the correct answer? Well, in fact, the correct answer is C, 1949. So this novel, 1984, was published on the 8th of June 1949, and it was Orwell's ninth and final book. In fact, his real name is Eric Arthur Blair, but he used the pseudonym George Orwell for his writing. I can tell you it's a very, very interesting book. If you haven't read it, I wholeheartedly recommend it. And it deals with a lot of themes that are relevant to today's society, like totalitarianism, freedom, repression by governments, mass surveillance, and the role of truth and facts in society. So it's a really good book. So, moving on to question number 6. Which of the following facts is not true about the moon? Is it A, that one side is always in the dark? Or B, that it was created from the same material as the Earth? Or C, the moon is getting farther away? Or D, it is approximately 400 times smaller than the Sun? Which of those 4 options do you think? Well, the correct answer is actually the first one, that one side of the moon is always in the dark. Now, it is true that there is one side of the moon that we cannot see from the Earth, but it's not in the dark. That's the common mistake. Because the Earth and the moon both rotate, they are both exposed to the sun. However, the moon is in a synchronous rotation with the Earth. So the moon rotates around its axis in roughly 27 days, which is approximately the same as the time it takes the moon to orbit the Earth. So we, standing on the Earth and looking at the moon, would only ever see one side of the moon. The far side is not possible to be seen unless you actually travel there. The other facts, well, in fact, the moon is getting farther away, very slowly, approximately 3.8 centimeters every year. And it is widely accepted that the moon was created when a rock, basically a planet, that's approximately the size of Mars, hit the Earth during its primeval period and basically ripped a big load of material off the Earth, which later formed into the moon and went into orbit. It's also true that the sun is about 400 times larger than the moon, but it's also true that the sun is approximately 400 times farther away. Now, that coincidence means that we can have an eclipse because the apparent size of the moon and the sun is approximately the same. So the moon, the much smaller moon, can appear to block out a lot of the light during a full eclipse. So there we have it. Moving on to question number 7. What does the H in HTML stand for? What does it mean? Do you think it means A, high, B, hypertext, C, hexadecimal, or D, heavy? In fact, the correct answer is the second one, hypertext. So this HTML is the common language that is used for displaying text and other things on the web. It is one of the basic technologies behind the web, and it was used in the early days to create documents with hyperlinks. So you could click on that link and it would take you to another related document. So moving on to question number 8. Where can we find Lake Titicaca, which is the largest lake in South America? Do you think it's on the border with Chile and Argentina, or Ecuador and Brazil, or Peru and Bolivia, or finally Brazil and Venezuela? Which of those options do you think is the correct one? In fact, the correct answer is C, Peru, Bolivia. Lake Titicaca is actually on the border between those two countries. It is a large freshwater lake high up in the Andes Mountains on the border, and it's often called the highest navigable lake in the world. It has an elevation of approximately 3,800 meters, so it's incredibly high. Moving on to question number 9. How much did the painting Salvator Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci sell for? Was it A, $50 million, B, $450 million, C, $65 million, or D, $268 million? In fact, the correct answer in this case is B, $450 million. The painting was sold at auction for that price on the 15th of November 2017 by Christie's in New York. And that makes it the most expensive painting ever sold at a public auction. The painting was supposedly painted by Leonardo da Vinci. However, there is some dispute over how much he was actually involved in it. Okay, moving on to the final question now. Question number 10. Which of the following events happened first chronologically? Do you think it was A, the English Civil War, or B, the French Revolution, or C, the Cuban Missile Crisis, or perhaps D, the Great Depression? So which of those historic events happened first? In fact, the correct answer is A, the English Civil War. The English Civil War was actually a series of civil wars and political events, political battles, let's say, between the royalists and the parliamentarians in the Kingdom of England from approximately 1642 till 1651. So, what about the others then? Well, the French Revolution was a period of political change that began in 1789 and ended in November 1799. Many of its ideas are considered fundamental to the concepts and principles of modern liberal democracy. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a 13-day confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union in October 1962. And this happened when there was a confrontation over the placement of nuclear weapons in Cuba. And people say that this was the closest the world ever came to a full-scale nuclear war, which thankfully was averted at the last moment. And the Great Depression, which took place from 1929 to 1939, was an economic shock that affected a lot of countries across the world. It began around September 1929 and led to the Wall Street stock market crash, which was commonly known as Black Thursday. It was the longest, deepest, and most widespread economic depression of the 20th century. So there we have it. That is the end of today's trivia quiz. I hope you've enjoyed it and perhaps learned something. And until next time, I'll say goodbye.